There we go. Oof. One of the best thoughts I feel. Some people the best probably. Talking about school, talking about life. So hello everyone to my second part here of my super classic, right? Talking about the whole life experience thing right there. Good. Okay, let's go. So today then I'm talking about how I am basically Negima, right? Yeah, I'm the real life Negima. Or of course, one of my absolute favorite character, right? Senku from dr.stone, right? So if you didn't know then, right, Negima, an old classic anime, right, and manga and so on, from the same person who Love Hina and so on, is about a 10-year-old boy that's a teacher in high school, right, for being 10, right? Of course, based on my true life story then, coming to the video, right? And so basically, it's like a long story, right? I'm gonna give you some of the bits here, and of course another stream talking about the bits. You can ask questions and so on, right, afterwards of that. So the kind of the basic premise is that my grandfather is, or was, he's dead now unfortunately, but he used to be a professor basically in math and history. So I'm also a history buff thanks to my grandfather, so I know basically everything about especially European history, right, the League Wars and so on, especially that kind of stuff, World War II and so on. No, but I like history, and he would teach me everything, from Roman history to Greek history and Japanese history and so on. And he was also fluent in many languages and so on, like Turkish and stuff like that. So a lot of different languages. But anyway, so my grandfather then taught me math. And both actually my grandfather did that, but especially my one grandfather and teacher and so on, and my grandmother and his wife also a teacher and taught me like French and English and so on. English, yeah. His wife and my grandmother is a language teacher and taught me mainly French when I was a kid then. But anyway, so when I got to school then, this is of course all true. So when I got to school, so I'm 6 years old, right? I'm going to first grade, and I'm already in like high school or even higher math than that. This is all true. So I was already like 6-7 years ahead in math, at least, probably even more. I was doing like integrals. I was doing like one thing I really liked as a kid was imaginary numbers, stuff like that. So I was doing that when I was very, very young. I was like 6-7. I was like, oh, this is really cool. What happens if you take the square root of this thing and so on? So for example, one thing I just love that answer to be all, to be an annoying kid, right? And it's going to come into this talking about school, right? But for example, if you take the square root of 4, what is the answer, right? And hopefully someone chat can answer it now. It's 2, of course. And so the square root of 4 is 2. It's actually incorrect answer. Because the actual answer is that the square root, which of course is you take a number, multiply with itself, and then it turns into a new number, right? So for example, 2 times 2 is 4, right? But the actual answer, what is the square root of 4, is 2 minus plus 2, right? So that's like plus minus 2. So it's either 2 or it's minus 2, because minus 2 times minus 2 is also 4. So that's the real answer to that question, which of course a lot of people understand, but it's a very basic math. And then if you take the square root of minus 2, or sorry, minus 4 I mean, or minus 2 is well against 1.4 I, but if you take the square root of minus 4, for example, or minus 9 or whatever, right, you actually get like 2I. It's like 2 imaginary I, usually when you into stuff like that, right? I was interested in, I like the Euler thing, I like the Euler path, stuff like that. So I did this stuff, and read this stuff and researched stuff and read the books about these people, right, when I was like 7, 8, something like that, right? So I was really into it and so on. And I of course was very, very ahead then, in especially math and all the similar. I'm pretty good at like physics and chemistry. And when I was 14, I memorized the periodic system. So when I was 14, I was like, I'm gonna learn. So yeah, very Senku. So I was like, I'm gonna memorize everything in the periodic system. And I don't just mean, like, okay, hydrogen and this stuff. I was like, okay, so oxygen, that's number 8. So it has 6 valence electrons, 2 valence, 2, the first shell is 2, and then the second shell is 8, so it has 6, and the right and so on, right? And now, like, nitrogen is like 7, and, carbon is like 4, that's why it's in the middle, that's 4, yeah, so on. So I was like memorizing all the different atoms Especially in the beginning, of course, they're different. The first rows, right, easy ones. And then I went into trying to memorize all the different stuff, like, you know, silver's weight and atom number and protons and so on. Of course, in chemistry, it's pretty simple, I think, right? Because the number of the atom is, of course, how much actually proton and, you know, how big it is in the sense, right? So, of course, hydrogen is the first one, has one proton, one electron. And the second one has no neutron. And then helium is the second one. And it's like, you know, 2 protons, right? 2 electrons. So I think it's pretty simple, right? It's very, very simple. Yeah, you memorize the order of that. You can figure it out, right? And it makes chemistry at school, of course, go very quickly because you don't need to use the system to, you know, get the weights and so on and to do the math with it. So anyway, stuff like that, right? So that's kind of the backstory, right? That's kind of the backstory. I did this stuff all the time. And what it leads to is unfortunately not like Negima, where you have, you know, a huge bunch of sexy, cute girls that likes you. It's more that people think that you are a freak. It's more like that, right? It is more like that. But I think that, to be honest, in my opinion, my life primarily, especially before I was a teacher and was more like, actually, if you ever seen, so yeah, we talk anime, right? Like old school anime here, in manga. It was more like, still someone can recognize the character here, it was more like Urumi Kanzaki. Okay, so maybe one person that watched the video in total in the world is gonna recognize this woman, but this is a, let's say, like IQ 200 manga super genius girl from Grand Teacher Onizuka, right? So of course, a manga and anime everyone should see, right? Amazing, but the coolest teacher ever, right? Badass, you know, yeah, yeah, Yakuza Yankee guy, right? Getting into becoming a teacher instead, so he could, you know, he could score it like MILFs and so on. But anyway, the basic premise, certainly, or the backstory of my life in school, is definitely similar to Urumi. So if you're seeing Grand Teacher Onizuka, she's basically at home, right? Because she doesn't have to go to school anymore. She's like banned from school because all the censors hates her, right? Because she's always like, oh, you're doing the math wrong, and why are you solving why are you fixing that issue like that, right? So that's kind of like me, right? So, for example, you know, especially in math class, right? I would always be like, oh, why do you do this thing? Why are you explaining it like this? And say, that's really stupid. Like, that's ineffective, yeah, and so on, right? So I was banned from math class. When I was in high school, I wasn't allowed to go to math class because I was like, oh, this is so silly, yeah. But it really wasn't because, you know, I was doing anything was wrong. It really was because I was living that Urumi life with a teacher. Some of them liked me, but half of them hated me, right? Because they couldn't answer my question. Right? It really was the feeling, if you've seen GTO, it's very, very similar actually, because she's kind of banned from going to school, right, in Grand Teacher Onizuka. Onizuka's gonna bring her back, right? He's the hero, right? You know, badass censor, right? But the older teacher kind of hates her because they are angry. There's one woman that hates her, right? Because they're angry, they can't. She makes them embarrassed, right? She asks the question like, "Oh, but isn't that wrong?" Or "Why would you say that thing in this math thing?" And they're like, "Oh, I can't answer this girl." And they can't throw it out, but they can't handle that. It was very much like that in my life, to be honest. That's kind of like the start, right? It was very, very much like that. So I was then. So I'm in high school, right? Junior high school, so when I was in high school. I'm in junior high school. I'm banned from going to math class. And this is, of course, a longer video if you can explain this thing, but I'm just going to take it and say, just leave it here, right? In Swedish school, this is Sweden, right? The horrible system of substitute teacher. Basically, anyone can be a teacher in Sweden, basically, right? So this is phrase that, I'm not gonna talk about it about that, but it's horrible. Anyone can be a teacher, okay, basically. I have been it later too. I've been a teacher when I was older too, right? And come back to school and been it, you know, for chemistry, physics, and math, and so on, right? Instead of just, you know, there's more stuff, for example. So it's very, very easy. And the best to take anyone that can do math. So I was then, this is kind of how it goes, right? They were basically like, oh, this guy is better than he teaches, right? He's like the best math guy we have in the whole town. He can do math. So that's kind of the basic, right? So they were like, well, this guy, he's like better than any teacher we have. And now the teacher is sick. Who's gonna do the math class? So they even asked me, I was 14 at the time then. So I am 14, so imagine this, I'm 14, right? I'm 14, and the teachers are like, the principal asked me, oh, can't this guy hold a math class? Because this guy's gonna be sick the whole next week, this teacher, right? So we can hire this guy. We can hire the student to be the teacher of his own peers. Needless to say, like in my last video, I was very popular at school, right? Yeah, it definitely turned into the Negima love harem show where all the girls were like, "Wow, amazing," or it was more like, "What a freak! How can he be doing teaching when he's our age?" Right? But this is true. This is true, and so I was then doing a few math classes and so on when I was in ready junior high school then in 4 other junior high school students, right? So that's kind of coming to this team, right? Of one of, yeah, as I mentioned last week, 1 per week here. We get some crazy life story of me, right? Because I have a lot of funny life stories, and so that's one of those crazy ones where it's like, oh yeah, I was teaching at high school, in high school. That's titled as a course video, and it's all true. And that's what this is the beginning of it, right? So in the beginning, I was actually teaching kind of like the whole class, right? The lecture thing, right? Yeah. I was doing that. As here, I like talk first. I was doing the lecture time, right? And of course, got merciless bullied or whatever for, right? But I don't care. I mean, and the thing, as I mentioned in the Negima video, right, last week, same thing there, right? If everyone's already bullying you, whatever, right? Because you're a nerd, like, who cares, right? Yeah, so who cares? For me, it's just funny because I can piss them off more, right? I can just piss them off more, right? So, you know, I just prefer it, right? Yeah, I might as well be in their face, right? With it. So that's the start of it. The next year, I was actually basically the teacher for like some of my classmates. It was really weird. So again, I don't want to spend too much here talking about the horrible school system, but basically, and this is a lot longer video to explain that, right? But again, Sweden, and I can make a lot of videos about Sweden, right? But Sweden is generally, they always aim to please the worst student, right? That is really what Sweden is about, yeah. So first of all, I can make a video about this probably one day, where if you are the person, you know, standing upright, they're gonna smack you down so you're on the same level as everyone else. Yeah. So in Sweden, you don't wanna be the person, you know, the thing that's higher up and in anything, right? They're trying to lower you down, right? So that's one thing too for that matter. I can take a short side note here. When I was in first grade then, right, in school, back to this, well, so many years ahead, right? They did everything they could, right, to push me down. They were like, "Oh no, this guy is, we gave him another book." So for example, one thing I did when I was 6 and 7 was that I did the books, right, in like a day. I had the book as finished. They would give me, instead of giving me the second grade book, right, the next year, they would give me another version of the first grade book for like another person that's written it, right. So I would have to do it again. So that was kind of effed up, yeah. So they're really trying to be like, he can't advance too much, we have to stop him, yeah. So that's really in a nutshell, okay? Definitely make another video, and the sun is copy paste, yeah, but definitely make another video about that one day, and explain that more in detail. But basically, they were doing that, right? So, the problem then, and with the sun as well, goddamn you sun, the problem then was that, from this notion then, right, as I mentioned here, they kind of always aiming at the lower students. So when I'm in 9th grade, most of my class, I said most, but maybe half or so, but at least half of my class, probably more, were really being screwed over, like I am by the sun here right now. God damn, so because, and this is a true story, absolute true story. So the school then is not aiming up here, right? The school's aiming down here. So they have a few students in my class, I won't say the name here, right? But they were really bad. We're talking like, you know, horrible bad, right? So ridiculously bad. And the school teachers then are aiming for those people. And I really mean it. So they're aiming for those, so they're slowing down, you know, the class and so on, right? So they're not teaching anything. Obviously, I wasn't allowed to go to class anyway, so I wasn't there. I was only there a few times and saw the you know, the horribleness of it. I saw it like a few times, just from like the outside, basically. So, but then several of my classmates and around my age, they were like, "Okay, we can't learn from this. We can't learn from this bullshit because they are putting us in like kindergarten, because we have a few students that are basically, you know, in their head, right? So they're trying to make the whole class like that, right? It's like, how does 7 smell, right? It's kind of that level, right? Yeah, and I genuinely mean it. So they were like, we can't learn here. So instead of them going to school to normal class, right? Because I was banned, but because in Sweden I had to go to school, so I couldn't go to the class, but I had to go to my own classroom. So I was sitting basically in like my own room and not allowed to go to the class. Okay, so this is a crazy story, but this is all true. This is stuff, right? So I was forced to go to school because of the Swedish school law, and then I had to sit in my own room with no teacher, and I was doing my own math. So I was like, today I'm gonna learn this math, and I did prefer it honestly, because then I could trade myself on like college math or whatever, right? So I could be 10 plus years ahead, right? I could do my own math, right? Just all the stuff, right? I could learn all the stuff, chemistry or physics, whatever, right? But I usually did math and the math I wanted to do, right? But anyway, so I have this room then that I'm in sitting in myself. Right? This is all true for like 3 years basically. Yeah, horrible, more or less. And but as I mentioned, that my classmates, especially at the 9th grade, they were like, we can't learn anything, right? Some of my classmates then. So they would then come to me. So they were like asked if they could go to my room instead, and then I would sit in my own classroom basically, right? My own lecture room, and I would actually teach them. So I became like the permanent teacher for a few, like a third or so of my class. So yeah, this is all true. This is all crazy true, guys, but this is all true. This is one of those really weird, most interesting man of culture stories I have, because this is 100% true. So I was basically teaching a few of my classmates regularly, like a few times a week, especially in math, but also other stuff too, but in math. And so that's kind of my, I was teacher in high school. That's kind of the basic of it. Of course, there's a lot of other interesting details and other, weird story parts and so on. But it was very similar to, I was clearly, in real life Negima, said that my class was like purely boys. I had my own yaoi harem instead. No, but seriously, that's kind of funny though. It's the reverse of Negima. Yeah, instead of having, it's like 10 cute girls in my personal class, I was like, I had 10 boys instead. I had all the guys that were like, screw this shit, I want to learn math. They would come to me instead. So it was unfortunately more like that. It was fortunately it's like 1 girl, 10 boys. But yeah, it is really crazy. And of course, there's so many factors to explain this thing. It mainly, it's a combination of, I'm pretty good at math, mainly, and also I'm pretty good at math. That's one thing, of course. Combine that with, like, horrible school system, right? Yeah, it's a combination of, how can you have an anime life backstory? Well, it's because they were really bad and I was really good, so these are the difference, right? It comes something in the middle, right? Yeah, because... not talking too much about it here, but of course, if I did this thing in I don't say most countries, but it is some of the countries, right? They would instead focused on helping me advance, right? So that's a drawback, though, obviously. Similarly to, for example, as I mentioned, Urumi from GTU and so on, right? Unfortunately, a school in that sense, that you are so advanced, you're so ahead of the class, you're so Senkuing it, so you're like, what can I do the teachers can't teach anything, right? And instead of getting you a special tutor or letting you advance, even though I did advance a little bit, they just kind of hold you back. It's really the opposite, kind of hold you back, right? Even, but so you don't learn. I mean, obviously, I could have probably cured cancer by now, right? If they actually would have helped me, right? So think about that, yeah. You can blame the school system for that. I could probably have saved everyone on the planet now, I could go my full Senku route, right? But instead of having that opportunity, unfortunately, my father wasn't Senku's dad, right? So I didn't get the opportunity to really grow in that sense. I mean it honestly, right? In a bad way, right? I didn't get the opportunity in that sense to really, really excel, right? Like I excelled further than all people, right, at my age, because I was doing all this stuff, especially again in math. But I got zero help, right, to excel at math. That's my grandfather, basically, right, at the time he could do it, right. So basically, what I would do is that I would go to school, right, normal school as a kid, and then I would go to my grandparents' place, very, very often as a kid, 7, 8, 9, and so on, right. Then I would go to my grandparents' place, right. As I mentioned, both of them were teachers. And then they would spend their evenings teaching me more stuff like math and language and so on. So yeah, so my grandma, for example, then teach me French, right? Because she's like, you need to speak French, right? Because some of my family members lives in other countries, right? They live in like other, in Paris and so on. She's like, you're gonna learn French, right? And you can learn English and so on as well, right? So I was like 5 or 6, and my grandma was teaching me doing glossaries for French and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, in that sense, talking about the typical noble boy life in that sense, right? In looking back like 5 years ago, whatever, you would used to teach like the prince or whatever, right? You have a tutor in these different languages, right? So I kind of had that life there, luckily then, with both my grandparents tutoring me, for example, that my grandmother would do these language things, right? So I would actually learn these different languages even as like 5, 6 years old and so on. Right? And I kept doing it, right? For a while afterwards too. Then I got addicted to gaming and anime, so I stopped going there. No, my grandfather died actually. That's the main reason why, honestly. He died when I was pretty young, unfortunately, in cancer. So that's the real issue why there. And so after that, then, right, since my grandfather passed away, I was kind of left, in that sense, to be like, okay, how can I Senku up my life? And no one's helping me, right? And remember that I'm an old man, right? I'm an old man that can't control the sun for some reason, but yeah, I'm an old man, right? And so remember that. So when I was a kid, so I'm in high school here, right? And I'm like, let's say 10 years ahead in math, okay, roughly, I don't know. There's no internet, There is internet, but the internet is like, is that internet, right? You probably, everyone listen to this thing, you're too young for this thing, but some people, we used to have the internet, and it was like, the old reference, yeah. So we have internet, but it's super slow and so on, right? There's no YouTube, right? There's no, whatever, the Twitter, right? So, I think today, this thing is easy, right? Because, of course, if you want to educate yourself, become a Senku, you can just go to like YouTube, you can watch like 100 hours, right, of everything from politics to science to this thing. So you can learn a lot of stuff, right, for different videos. Of course, some videos are kind of, so I must say you have to take everything with a grain of salt, right? That's the problem here, though. Like how reliable is the person talking about that? Or do they actually know what they're saying, right? That's an issue, of course. But also there might be a person, right? My recommendation is, of course, go to like recorded lectures from, of course, different schools, right? But anyway, I digress. My point is that when I was a kid, that didn't exist, right? So that definitely felt similar, again, to, as I mentioned, Urumi or the similar character to that, where you have the lifestyle, you're like, oh man, I know all this shit I can do in school, and it's like, can anyone teach me something else? And it's like, no, we can't. So I spent a lot of time at the library, and I would go and read books, and I would try to, educate myself. I would try to improve, right? And I unfortunately didn't have, this like science lab, whatever. I've been trying to like, is to become better at stuff. For example, one thing I did then is, is an anime channel, right? Talked about a little bit more the video. I went back and when I was 15. I started to like, learn Japanese on like a higher level, right? First I did it in anime and gaming, and I was 15. I started to be like, okay, I'm gonna, borrow these books, right? I'm gonna go to glossaries, like when I used to learn all the different, kanjis and so on. I started doing that when I was 15. Stuff like that, right? So that's kind of interesting. Unfortunately, I got stuck in that sense. As I mentioned, when I was teaching my peers, are teaching people in my high school, right? Again, I was teaching people in my own age, right? For at least a whole year in high school. It also became a little, I'm not saying it was bad, but because I couldn't really advance that much myself anymore, it was really hard. So just thinking about reflecting over new ideas, just trying to be like a madman, right? Trying to come up with my own formula, basically. In that sense, it was very, very hard. Advancing very, very slowly by myself, right? Teaching them felt pretty good, right? Because I was like, well, I can teach other people what I know, right? So I can teach you what I learned like 5 years ago. But whatever, kind of, but kind of like that, yeah. So it felt really good because I was like, if I used to sit here myself in this room, I am very, very slowly advancing my own skill, right? Every day I'm slowly advancing, but it's like it's not even 1% better than yesterday, right? Very, very slowly. I can learn, I can teach them, I can teach them a lot of stuff faster than I can learn myself, right? So it felt to some degree more useful to also be a teacher at that level, because I'm like, man, I'm not coming up with anything new myself anyway. To some extent, though. One thing I would say, though, is that based on this backstory, though, I spent a lot of this time. When I got into college, though, I was irritated even before this, especially, well, even more in college. So in college, you would learn a lot of these names, like for example, Dimitri's principle of that. And I would be like, why does a Russian have this name for? Yeah, honestly, I'll come to college and I'll be like, why is this ID named after this Russian, right? And I'll say this because he was wrong. I'll say that because I also had the same ID, right? I had the exact same theory principle in my head when I was 15, right? I never read a book about this. I just invented it by myself, honestly. I just did it by myself. And no one ever taught me how to do it. I just figured it out. And then I go to college and they have like a book about this guy, and I'm like, man, this is pretty cheap. I also have this idea, like, it's my idea, and so on. And then I realized that, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't really go into like, you know, any kind of academia in math, because I was like, while everything isn't discovered in math, I felt that everything that is interesting on like a mechanical level in math is already discovered. So I was like, well, I mean, all my youthful ideas is already someone's book somewhere. So I was like, man, it's pretty boring. You have to go really high advanced to get new stuff right. But I mean, it wasn't like you can invent those stuff from your brain. Yeah, so that frustrated me, honestly, because I had all these ideas, and every time it was kind of like, oh, someone already did it. Yeah, I was trying when I was 15, 16 and so on, even older, to come up with new theories, right? With new basic theories. More, I focus more on, you know, rudimentary math that is like, you know, strings or whatever, right? And every time I'm like, this could be something, and I try to like, someone already put it like 3, okay, I found years ago, get damn it. So I am born in the wrong time, everyone. That was frustrating me like crazy, because every time I had, this is a good idea, this is a good math idea, especially with math and physics, but especially with math, and I was like, this is a good idea, and I was like, no, someone already did it. I was like, god damn it. For example, one classic thing that I discovered as a kid, which is, this is proven today then, I mean, it's proven before I was born, right, but I didn't know about it, is, for example, the principle, which I mentioned a bit earlier, is where if you divide something and it becomes a loop, it can actually tell you exactly how it's going to go. Let me try to explain that. So if you divide something like, let's have a good number here, wasn't too hard, 20, okay, 20 divided by 7, okay, what is that? Okay, so 20 divided by 7, it's something like 2, because 2, you know, times 7 is 14, right? And that leaves you a rest product of 6, right? So it's going to be 2, and then you have to figure out, okay, what is the closest number to 60 then, actually, which is 54. So, you know, okay, 7 times that, and that gives you the next, you know, like, the next number, the next rest product, right? Okay. So if that rest product is the same as the previous rest product, that can actually tell you that you're going to have an infinite loop of rest products. So basically, whatever you divide, like 20 times 7 or, you know, 15 divided by 4 or whatever, right? You get some kind of uneven product, right? Like you get to like, you know, 2.3 point, you know what I mean? Yeah. And the point here I'm making is that if you get something like 2.66666, whatever, then you know there's going to be an infinite number of 6s, because it's 4 times product every time. But even if you get something like 2.537, okay, 537, and the next number is 5 again, so 537, 5, the next number then is going to be, you know, the earlier loop, so 537, 537, so it's going to be the 3 again. So you can always tell you that the next rest product is the same thing again, you know, if you do the math right. So that's kind of this principle of the rest product, how it's always gonna loop over. So you can tell exactly how the next thing is gonna look by looking at the first number. So you can actually predict the whole series, right? So you can always do that. For example, if you code that, usually in a calculator, right? They do it, they do the same thing all over again. Some people code that like, you know, you keep dividing it forever, then they cut off, like they truncate it after a while. But that's stupid. The better way to code this thing is to figure out that, okay, I have an infinite loop now of rest product. Usually 3 numbers is enough, and they can tell them, okay, you don't have to, you know, calculate anymore. You can stop the loop now and just print this number out, because it's going to be the same thing. That will save you a lot of optimization actually, if you're doing this kind of division, for example. But most people are bad at coding, so they know how to do code, but they can't actually do it in a good way. So they will just do like an infinite loop of that shit. For example, right? This is something I then come up with when I was like 13, 12, something like that. I was just testing different stuff in, you know, my head that I was like interesting. So basically, I was like 13, and I was like, oh, interesting. If I do this math thing, it's always gonna turn into this loop thing. So that means that this is an infinite loop, right? So I wrote it down. I was like, oh, infinite loop, and this thing is gonna, you know, go on forever, right? This math thing is gonna, and I tested different numbers, right? And however I did it, I could come up with, okay, whoever I do it is gonna be the same thing. Okay, interesting, right? So I had the idea. And then of course some Russian guy already, you know, invented it or whatever, Greek guy, yeah, before me. And I was like, could have been mine. But yeah, so it's kind of like that. So I spent my my days of math when I was not teaching then, thinking of stuff like this, right? Trying to come up with different I don't know, theories and systems, stuff like that, right? Like one of my other favorites, get briefly here, before I talk about some more interesting stuff with anime, is that you can always calculate, this is what I teach people all the time, you can always calculate if something is divided by 3 if you look at the sum product of the numbers. I think it's really interesting. So if you look at 12, okay, 12 is divided by 3, it becomes 4, right? We all know that's very simple. But if you look at 1 plus 2 equals 3, right? That's the sum product of the number, right? 12, 1 plus 2. And this is actually true for everything. So that's something I figured out too as a kid. So if you take something like, I don't know, 603, pretty simple, right? Yeah, but it's 9. But if you take something more interesting, 633, as you know, it's 12, so on, right? So all those numbers that you can combine in the number, the actual sum, and then turn it into divided by 3. That has that is divided by 3. So likewise, then if you do programming sorting, for example, the classic issue in coding is to give you every prime number, right? Give you a prime number, yeah. Like give me every prime number from 1 to 1000, the classic coding issue, like learn how to code, right? And the first thing you do is you remove every even number, right? So 2, 2 is a prime number, like 4 and up after 2, then so 4 and 6 and so on. You remove them, right? After 1000, okay, that's the first thing. At least you have number left. The next thing you should do, actually, then talking about here, is you should look at to remove every number where the sum turns into divided by 3, right? Left up at 12 and so on. Well, 12 is already removed because it's it's also even, but something not even. 33, okay. 33 on 6, right? Obviously 11 over 3, yeah. That should be removed, right? This is important if you have like 1 to a million in numbers, right? So then you can remove all the even numbers, and every number that is combined into a 3 or divided by 3, right, can be removed from 1 to a million to give you all the prime numbers, right? It's gonna make you save a lot of time and so on. That's how you should think, right? When you actually do coding and so on, or algorithm math, right? So it should be like, how can I combine it in a better way, right? Stuff like that I come up with when I was like, I don't know, 14, 13, right? But again, of course, some bastard already invented it. See? I hate my life, yeah. Every goddamn time I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. I mean, of course, someone already discovered that like 2000 years ago, and of course, everyone is like good coder, like Google or whatever knows this already, right? Yeah, like everyone is good at optimizing code knows stuff, and, you know, mathematical optimization, yeah, they all know this stuff. So, dude, I am 13, 14, like, yeah, I'm awesome. And I'm like, okay, god damn it. It's already like 500 people know this shit, god damn it. So, stuff like that. We can also use prime number twinting, which is good too, to make it faster. So that's the, how does that thing? Twin prime number are numbers that are, and this is connected to what I talked about. Prime numbers are numbers like 41, 43. That's a twin prime number, okay? And it only exists one triple prime number, which is 257. So only is inexistent triple prime number. You can prove this because if you look at any number of a twin prime number like 41, 43, and you plus 41 or 43, or minus, you know, either plus or minus, in value in 2, you're gonna get a number that's divided by 3. So you're gonna get back to what I talked about, the plus something, right? So if you take 43 plus it by 2, you get 45. 45 is 9, and it's divided by 3, right? So 45, of course, is 15, but it's also 45. You know, 5 plus 5 equals 9. So there you get. That's how you know that it's going to be a triple prime number. So basically, the classic coding issue. If you want to sort out every value as a prime number between 1 to a million, you can also look at every twin prime number and then get faster. But anyway, stuff like this then, I figured out myself, right? That's what I spent my time doing in my own little math classroom. So there I sat and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. but yeah, hello, bro. But what can I say though? For doing that stuff, I've been teaching stuff in physics, of course. Some stuff like, you know, doppelgangers and stuff like that, right? I was like sound effects, hate the constant. What more have I taught in physics? Chemistry, as I mentioned, I remember the Pure system and so on. That was pretty fun, and I was doing. Well, I have this issue, okay? I have one. Okay, here's a Senku story. It's a Senku story I was in college. Okay, not teaching, but in college. I was taking chemistry in college, right? So this is like, advanced physics, chemistry, physics, so on. Took them both in college. And during my chemistry exam, this is how you know in a Senku moment, because I was entering this exam, right? And I had to be in another classroom for some reason. Yeah, it was like full. Okay, so they have a number of seats, right, per exam thing, right, per exam hallway. I mean, and so they put me in another like some kind of sub-study classroom because there's so many students there. So I put in another room. So anyway, during the exam, then I realized, and this is how you know your physics, right? So I realized that, like, okay, the actual first two questions on this chemistry exam, they can't be right. Like, I realized the professor has written them wrong. Because like, this is impossible to solve. This is impossible to solve. It's like he's asking for a benzene thing, and this it can't be done. Like, it's physically impossible to do this thing. So I am so aware of my chemistry and physics. I'm like, no, this is impossible to solve because the actual, the examples is impossible in reality. So I'm like, no, he has to have written it wrong. He has to mean benzene instead in this situation, blah blah. So I sit down and I assume that he has done it wrong, and then I solve it as what I expect he should have written, right? Like that. Yeah. So I solve it like that, right? So then you're up something, because like, I think I'm so fully aware of what it should be. So I'm doing that. And anyway, so after about 2 hours, then, right, the professor actually arrives into my room, right? Because I'm in the other room, and he's like apologizing. Oh, I was in the other room. He was in, as I mentioned, the other room that my other classes were in, right? It was full. He's like, I was in that room, and I told them that, yeah, the first questions, they are very wrong. This is the actual questions. And I was like, oh, don't worry, I already solved them based on what you tell me now. So he looked at it and I was like, yeah, that was great. So that's how you know you're in that Senku moment. And I was like, oh, I already solved your questions based on what I think you were gonna ask me for. He's like, yeah, that looks great. so that was pretty good. I got an A plus on my chemistry. It was pretty easy. but I remember this moment so well because I was like, this has to be how he wants me to. The question here doesn't make any sense. This has to be how he actually wants to examine me, right? It's so stupid. And of course, when he looks at it, and he was like confirming, like, yeah, that looks great. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be, I'm gonna pass this course. So, but yeah, that was a fun course. It was a pretty good course actually. Learned all the chemistry thing. Yeah, I took chemistry, physics, and so on. What more story do I have? Well, I'll say this thing: almost every math course I ever took in college, including chemistry and physics, I never studied the course. I studied like one day. Come on, guys. I watch anime. I want to go watch my wife was right. Yeah. I was like, I took like probability, advanced probability in grad school, and I only studied for like one night. And I was like an all-nighter. I sit up at night and I was watching some TV, some anime. I was like one anime episode. I did one, exam question thing, like preparing all the exams. One anime episode, and then I was like one other example episode, separate question. And I did that for a few hours in the evening. Then I went there and got like I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. I didn't care about getting like 5 or 8 passes, like whatever, it's gonna get like a pass, but stuff like that, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the issue though of being this high school math teacher guy, right? When I got into, even already at senior high school a bit, but especially at college, I have never in my life before that time, and also not even at that time, but some extent, ever had to study, right? Honestly, like I would just go to math, and I get the perfect grade, and I would just leave, right? Yeah. So even at college, I was like, I have to study now. We have to actually sit down and learn something. I was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. So I was like, I don't want to. How do I do that, right? So that's the problem, right? Because you had a life, right, where you're so understimulated. Of course, my issue, understimulated, right, all my life, and you get to that. You finally get to somewhere where someone is like, you have to learn stuff now, and it's actually gonna be at least hard on that. You can't learn it in one day, right? You have to actually study a little bit, right, and try to, at least have a little bit of, exercise to learn it, right? You can't just learn it like immediately. So that was obviously my hard issue at college, because I had never in my life before college ever sat down and actually studied anything in my life. And it sounds kind of weird. I talked earlier about, but were you sitting in your own class? Yeah, I had the course by myself. I had learned stuff, right? By myself, as dictate, I would read books, and I learned the history and different chemistry and so on. Right? But I never really ever had to go to a classroom and actually teachers like, this is the home exam, right? Or this is the the home before tomorrow, so on. I never did those. Yeah, I used to do it immediately. I was like, I have to finish in a minute, right? So I never actually ever in my life until I was like 19, 18, 17, I don't know, still, ever had to actually say, okay, I have to study now for this many hours, right, to pass anything. Because I would just go to class, I would learn from the lecturer, right, teacher, if even that, right, and I would just get a good, and I had perfect grades, right, in high school, yeah, A plus and everything in junior high school. So I would never really do anything. So I got to college. That definitely was an issue there, coming from that math backstory, that I had learned a lot of math, right, but of course in some of the college different math subjects, because in college of course you have many different many different how to say it, when you get to college in math, right, and I was a very math focused college, right, you actually suddenly have 10 different math courses, right. Usually before that you have like math A, math B, math C, math D, math E, right, but now you have like calculus, right, and you have like probability math, 3 types of probability math. I took 3 different ones. You have like coding math and finite math, so you have different kind of this math subjects, right, suddenly expert math stuff, right. So they're very, very, very right in detail, right, on the specific subject. Like, for example, I took math modeling, right, where you do different kind of graphs of, you do this like, okay, you have fishes eating, we have car traffic, right. How can you like how can you look at car traffic and calculate what road is going to have the most cars in one day, or what's the fastest shortest path, classic thing, right? But also not shortest path is like fastest way to take the bus ride from A to B, right, in a city. And that's simple, right? But then you have shortest path given that there is traffic, dynamic traffic, right? So shortest path is in the morning, this is the best path. But in the evening, this is the best path based on traffic and so on, right? That's math modeling, right? You can look at all the different values, and you use a kind of graph, you use different dynamic values based on different data points given time and so on, right? And also then the next step is like human behavior, right? So you have that stuff, but it's an accident, then you have human behavior, and then you add like Bayer's theorem. It's like this thing happened this day, and it rains every 5th day, and then this happens, and then the traffic is slower because it rains and so on. I think you get more and more parameters, and you more and more expand that mathematical point, right? But anyway, so at college, you get into that stuff, right? It's much more deeper, right? It's one subject of math, and so that was clearly the issue of having this life before then, being this math crazy guy, right? And older subject, especially math, because I never had to ever in my life before, ever study, like never. Like I would never sit down like now and be like, I'm gonna read the book now, right? Nah, never happened, right? I would used to go home and I would, watch anime and play games, right? That's why I could play so many games. Come on, guys! Like, how do you think I had a whole lifetime of watching anime and games as a student, as a kid, right? And also in college. How can I spend so much time, like 10 hours a day watching anime, right? Well, it's because I never ever once tried to get good grades, because I would get them automatically, right? I never tried to get the grades, right? So that's the issue, though. And to be honest, though, I mentioned earlier, right? But it's a big problem in Sweden, right? It's not a video really, but because most of my classmates had the same issue, right? They were so used to getting A plus in programming and math, so on, without ever trying, right? Because the bar to get a good grade in Sweden is so low, right? It's so low bar to get a passing grade, right, or even high grade. It's so incredibly low that at college they have the exact same, college international set, right? So you get to college and it's like 100 times harder than it was before. So that's a really bad problem, honestly, a really bad problem. I mean, for example, I had an A++ crazy grade in coding, right? When I was in high school. I was a very good coder. I thought so at least, right, in high school. And then I get to like first grade of college, and it's like the first 2 weeks of coding college is like basically 3 years of high school coding. There's a difference, like insanely difference. Like having an A+ at high school coding, it's not even like an F in college coding, right? In the first course of coding, not the 10th course, the first course. Then you have another 11, 10 code courses, right? So the difference is massive, right? So that's the thing I mentioned, though, that I saw everyone else having the same issue, though, more or less, right? It was a very clear divide. Basically, half students would be very, very attuned to studying and really hard work to get the grade right, And the other half would be like, study? How do I do that? What, a book? How do I read books? Yeah. And the other half would be like, just go to the exam and probably get a grade. Yeah. So it was massive. It was massive. It was massive. And I will do another video about this in the future. But what I kind of realized, though, of course, is to be able to be, to be able to get my waifus every day, right? And read all my hentai and so on, right? To be able to do that, I of course devised a strategy how I can spend as little time possible, though, of course, studying. So yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not gonna study good. I'm gonna be like, how can I spend the least amount of time to get a good grade, but the average trying, right? So I can spend more time playing games than watching anime and reading some hen stuff. Yeah, basically, honestly, that was like my goal. So I was like, how can I devise that? So that's not the video in itself, definitely, that to explain that. But basically, what I did then for most of my courses, and I never failed a course after second grade. Yeah, I failed a few courses, honestly, the first grade, like usually when I started right college. I was like, oh, this is kind of weird. I have to study now. Yeah, I was like, what? I can just go there and get a full grade. I understand. Yeah, and then the second year I was like, pass everything easily. And so what I did is, short version now then, is that I would just, before the course would start, or the first week, but especially the week before, I would go to the website or whatever for the course, right? I would look at the exams, the previous exams, right? Oh, last year, this for the question on the math exam. Okay, this was the last questions, okay. So then I would study those questions, right? Usually, because we come again, I'll study these questions, right? The first week or the week before, and then when I am at, of course, the first week of the class, right? I would ask the professor, okay, how do you solve this thing? I didn't understand this weird whale issue with the krills and dynamics. How do you fix this thing? He'd be, you do this, right? Okay, so then I would learn how to do that, right? Then I would ask my professor, like this, the first few weeks, because I already knew what questions I didn't understand from, looking at them once, right, from all the exams. So then I would ask the professor, a few times, right, during the first 2-3 weeks. And after that, I would get like a great grade because I mean, if I looked at an exam, right, I can usually figure out half of the questions, right, without training, right. I was like, figure it out, but going, yeah. So I would ask him the few I didn't get right, and then of course, by doing that, I would be able to just get like easy grade anyway. So I spent maybe like, I don't know, a few hours before it started, and then just have someone just hand tutor me, right, in the first few days there, and I'm like, okay, I get it now. then I just go there. But that being said, though, when I did calculus, I didn't prepare myself at all. I just went there. I was like, whatever, calculus is pretty easy. So I went to calculus, and I didn't know how to actually solve the issue. I mean, I knew the answers class immediately. So when I was calculus, advanced calculus in college, I didn't know how to actually fix like the issue as they want, right? So I was like, okay, I know the answer is like, I remember it was 4 minus 4x. So I know the answer because it was like you had to get derivative of this, like, integral, upside down integral kind of thing. But I saw immediately that it was a mirrored integral. It was very simple that it was a mirror. So I know it was going to be like, the same value, like 4 minus 4, whatever. I knew it was going to be the same thing. So I was like, okay, this is the mirror thing. And so I could immediately, so watching the image, figure out the correct answer, right? Immediately in a second. So then I sat there, I remember this so well, it's like 15 years ago now, guys. It's super late, but I still remember it. 15 plus years ago. I sat there, and I was like, I know the exact answer. And it's about like 10 points, and like 20 points, it's like a passing grade, whatever, so crazy like that. So I was like, okay, I know the answer, but I have no idea how they actually fix this stuff as clues, because I haven't, whatever, yeah, I've been watching my animes. I have no idea how they actually want me to answer the question right, because they want to give like a 5-page explanation, and they have this like number tables, they have to do that matrix stuff and shit and all this crap, right? And I was like, but I know the answer. Like, I know the answer. The answer is so simple because it's so easy to figure out the answer. Probably it's like instinctively knowing what's gonna be, right? It's like 42. Yeah, I was like, this is the number, yeah. So I sat there. And I did this legendary thing, which is true, where I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna write, this is the answer, and it's the classic legend, right? People always tell me this is true. I was like, this is trivial. I'm just gonna write, this is too easy. Obviously the answer is this, and I won't answer anything. I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. So I'm just gonna write, this is too easy for me. I won't explain it to you how I solved it. Too easy, yeah, it's like too trivial. Level 1 question. Answer is this. And then I was like, well, I handed it in. And I didn't get 10 points, I got 5 points. So he took off like 5 points. He's like, well, it's the right answer, so I guess to give you 5 points then. Like, God damn it. But I remember that. I was like, God damn, how do I solve this? And But basically, you need to use this like Tekken table, where you explain why it's negative or plus or whatever. But it was so stupid. It was so easy. And actually, I never learned to do it. I'm better than I never learned to do it. I never learned how to actually do those Tekken table minus plus things. So I was like, why do I need that? I can obviously in my head tell you what the answer would be anyway in those kind of questions. I was like, I don't need that. So I never learned it. And then I was in the exam and I was like, interesting. I did the same thing though when I was studying actually. When was this? I was going to calculate something at advanced graphics. So it was a very math heavy, with all this matrix stuff, right? Very, very heavy, have to do, advanced graphic course at grad school. It was the same thing there when I was like, you have to calculate how to do reflective projection, right? With like different screen on the exam. And I said to the tube and I was like, this is so simple that I can just answer it. And I remember too because I had 2 questions. So I answered it very, very detailed. Answer 1 or 8, 7A. I was like, this is how you do it. Like, it's super easy. I was like, this is long. Then 7B is like, please explain the theory behind it. I was like, look at A. I was like, arrow. I was like, whatever, arrow up. I was boring. I was like, this is how you answer it. I was like, I answered it in the previous question, so I won't even answer it. It's like it's basically explained up there, right? So yeah, my high school life and my college life, in that sense, was very similar, right? And of course, as I mentioned, unfortunately, you didn't get that Negima. I mean, again, right? I wish I had this life, right? We got all the Negima harem, right? Being teacher, but instead it's more like, no, all the girls find you are a freak, and all the guys hate you because you're too different, right? Yeah, so that's the more reasonable way you're gonna live through that, right? That's the more reasonable way you're gonna live through that. It's a strange experience, and unfortunately, it doesn't really turn into the anime thing. It's more like, it's kind of strange. Yeah, it's more like that, right? I can say a lot, of course, more stories about this thing. Many more stories. I mean, as I mentioned, though, even at college, I just figured out. I won't get it here, but I figured out a lot of ways how to just, get a passing grade without trying, right? I mean, the goal in life should be to how can I maximize my otaku time, right? How can I get more free time? But that being said, though, I was doing a lot of games and other stuff on the side, right? So you learn more from doing that, right? I would say this thing about college, even though I'm not gonna say too much here, but going to college for me was like, it's so easy to get a grade, it's so easy to just get an exam, right, and pass that. So I just go to college to get a stamp of approval, right, that I have this degree, right. That's the only reason I went to college. I didn't go to college to learn anything, honestly. Okay, fine. I think some courses are really great. I'm not saying that was pointless. I'm saying some courses are really great, right? Because you learn a lot in them, absolutely. But half the courses, like the math, chemistry, physics courses, man, I didn't learn much there. I could learn it faster at home, right? Or basically the same thing. Yeah, I already knew it. Physics, same thing. I just went there and learned, right? Most of it I knew, right? So, in a way, college in that sense is a way to like get a pass that you know your math or you know your chemistry, right? Whatever. Yeah, it's a way to like confirm that you know this. That being said, though, I think half of the stuff was good, right? Half of the stuff was like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know this thing, right? Oh, this is interesting. From like my grad courses in more, human behavior and so on. I didn't know that much about that, right? And the psychology and those kind of books I studied mostly in grad school. I didn't know that, so that was very interesting. But I also took chemistry and physics, as I mentioned, and that was so easy. So I was like, man, okay, physics grad school is like, I already know this. Yeah. So that felt pointless, right? Where it's more like, that feels like you just go there, forget that stamp, right? I went to the exam, I didn't study anything. I studied like, one day before, went to the exam, get a grade passed, and then I go home. But it's kind of like that, right? It's like, what am I even doing here? Again, a few courses actually, I never even went to the classroom. A few courses in college, maybe like 4 or 5 or so, I never even went to the classroom. I was like there once. I realized, okay, this is really easy. I already know this shit, right? I didn't go there. I went to the exam and I passed the exam, got like an A on the exam, and I was like, I got a grade this shit. Yeah, I did it like 3-4 courses easily. Yeah, absolutely. And there was one course I remember. It was industrial economy, and leadership. But in leadership, I was there twice. First day, and then you had to, you had to give some kind of lecture. You had to present your your study, your homework. Right? So I was there once the first day, And then 6-7 weeks later, I was there to present my case, right? Oh, I built this company. This is how you build a company, or whatever. Right? This is what I researched this 6 weeks. I was like, of course I did. I just went there, right? I just went there, and I was like, started one day. I was like, I did this shit, and then I did the exam right afterward. Yeah, so I was like there 2 times to that. So of course, right? Of course, when you were at school, you try to maximize your way to get the time right. That's how you should live, right? That's how you should live, right? But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of the basic story, right? High school teacher. Last one was more, of course, the cooler, right? Talking about being a ninja, which of course is a classic story, right? You know, I was working down with weights and so on. And so you see that the combination there, right, of being a guy that will both be teaching at school and also running around like Rock Lee at school, right, gives you a pretty nice image, right? That's why I call it CS, of course, the most interesting man of culture, right? Because I find it pretty comedic, interesting, but also it's a typical, anime otaku touch on it, right? Like for example, when I was a teacher once, and this is actually not the high school, just as a grown-up as teacher, as a physics teacher. The first time I did was I went in and I was like, grand teacher. I was like, you will call me this. I am your onizuka guy. Yeah, I'm your onizuka. Yeah, I was like, yes, I will anime this thing. And I actually come in dressed as, the onizuka shirt and so on. Yeah, I went into the classroom wearing basically this thing, right? Yeah, I was like, that's right. No, honestly, I went in the class and I was like wearing this shit and I was like, yeah, that's right. I'm gonna cosplay. If I'm gonna be the teacher, I'm gonna cosplay this shit, right? So yeah, it's pretty interesting in that sense. You can imagine, I think it is. You can imagine the combination there, and of course, subscribe, right? Press the like button. Of course, next week we do another introspect view, right, of a similar stuff. See what I figure out. But the next video is something similar. Maybe martial art. We will see. It will be a touch on it. It will be a little crazy, right? It will be into anime. Anyway, I like to keep it secret, right? To see what people think next week. By the way, yeah. Next video is probably One Piece after that, right? One Piece live reactions of one chapter. It might be out now. I think it was out in this morning, but it was a really bad quality, so I didn't read it. I'm gonna read it as soon as it's out. And of course tomorrow we also have Usaki, and we have Rent a Girlfriend, right? Get the cringe and so on. And I think I'm also doing a video for that matter where I try to explain what I feel at least is the difference between good and bad cringe, right? Because I have a lot of discussion about people now about why Rent a Girlfriend is a decent show, but mainly feels really like, oh, this is all cringe, oh, it's like disgusting, oh, not cringe. But one of my favorite shows is of course Myrmonden, which I feel is like a great cringe, right? But Myrmonden, I'm like, you go girl, oh it's cringe, but you go, I love you, good official, yeah, like in that. But I think this answer, and I'll try to make a video about it maybe next week, but I'm thinking about it still here. But I think his answer is because she is so likable. Like she's so cringe, and you feel sorry for her, but you really like her. You sympathize with her, right? But with Kazuya, I Want a Girlfriend, you feel like, oh, he's so. You're like, oh my god, this guy is horrible. Yeah, you're like, oh, I hate this guy. Yeah, so even if they have kind of the same cringe level, I guess, to be honest, because she is so likable, in my opinion, he's very dislikable. I think that's the reason why. So you can handle her cringe, but you feel sorry for her. But in his cringe, you feel like, oh man, god, this is just so annoying. It's just so annoying. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to explain that. That will be one of my other sides I'm working on. So I'm really trying to think about that. Why is some cringe good, right? Yeah, good and bad cringe. I think it's topic at least. But anyway, see you guys. Have a great day. Hopefully doing that One Piece thing later tonight. Maybe even after this. I'm gonna look at it if it's out now. And I'll see you guys.